vandag welkom Dr. Gillian Arendse by ons. Dr. Arendse is in Engels lees ek hierso, he's the Deputy Director for the Stellenbosch University Centre of Student Recruitment and Career Advice, overseeing strategic interventions that support the undergraduate recruitment practices at Stellenbosch University. Dr. Arendse, baie welkom. Gillian, baie welkom. Ek is vir my so voorreg om met jou te gesels. Ek onthou toe ek daai video's van jou begin kyk het wat so op sosiale media omgegaan het, ek gedink ons wil graag met jou gesels bietjie. Ek wonder soms of dit meer die onderwysers beïnvloed as wat dit die kinders beïnvloed het. Ek weet nie wat jou motief was met daardie video's nie, maar ek wil net vir jou dankie sê daarvoor. Ja, ons het vir Dr. Gillian ingekry om sommer net bietjie met ons te gesels, met die ouers, met die kinders, met die onderwysers. Ons voel uit baie om te sê vir die mense daar buite, nie uit sy ervaring, maar ook uit sy hart as 'n liefhebber van kinders en van Suid-Afrika. So ja, ek gaan al die vrae in Engels vra, maar net omdat 'n groot deel van ons gehoor kan moontlik nie Afrikaans verstaan nie, maar jy kan in enige taal antwoord wat jy
100%.
The first question is, when do you think was the last time that the education system was as challenged as it is now?
Well, Herbie, first of all, thank you for the opportunity, and thank you that you think that my thoughts and my ideas could in principle be of service and of use to specifically your parents, but also the learners within your school. I think from my perspective, and I'm not an educationalist, this is probably just my observation. I think we have to admit that our educational system has always been challenged. I think the reality is that we're now at a place where through COVID or the pandemic, our inadequacies, our inabilities, our inefficiencies will actually be exposed. I think we have for a long time been aware of the fact that we actually have three educational systems. We have the no fee, we have those who are able to pay fees, and obviously that is ranging from quite affordable to really expensive. And then we have private education. But I think, if you think in terms of what Sir Ken Robinson says, he says that when we think about education, there are really three things that we need to think about. Number one, what is it that we're teaching? Number two, we have to know that we actually taught that. And then thirdly, we have to talk about how we do it. And I think where we're at the moment, we're at a place where we are probably being confronted with the how. We introduced back in the day curriculum 2005. I don't know if you still remember that. So there was this big buzz around outcomes-based education. A lot of people called it other bastards efforts instead of OBE. But we went from outcomes-based, and then we stepped into trying to revise the curriculum. So we had the revised national curriculum statement. Now we have the national curriculum statement. We added caps to that. So we spend a lot of time on what we teach. We spend a lot of time on whether we actually taught. But I think we're at the point now where we need to start asking some serious questions around how do we do it? And especially as educators are now being confronted with a new challenge of using technology, and kids have to sit at home and in a sense being homeschooled. And I think that's where we are. So we are confronted with a system that I think for a long time has not worked, but I'm excited about the prospects. I think if you're in education now, it's probably the best place to be.
I agree with you. I remember when the outcomes-based was introduced, I was just out of high school. My brother was the first to hit it, and I just remember smiling at the amount of different things that he had to do than compared to what we had to do. He turned out really well, I must say. So there were some good outcomes at the end. I'd like to hear your thoughts on how you think the world as general might look different post this pandemic, because that will play a role for our learners. A lot of them have thoughts about, have interactions with members abroad, or possibly wanting to travel abroad or work or study abroad. So globally, how do you think things might look different?
Well, I think I think the reality is that I almost want to say that the world as we knew it will no longer exist. I think we will all have to adapt different practices. We will need to rethink how we engage, but we understand the importance of, us being connected physically. And we'll have to find new ways of ensuring that still happens. But I think if we think in terms of education, I think that the buzzword at the moment is the fourth industrial revolution. We've gone from steam to electricity to computation, and now we're into the space of intelligence, whether it's artificial or social or environmental. And I think we have to ask ourselves whether our educational system has bought into those ideas, and whether we have really started contributing to a new kind of, let's call it graduate, because we're all part of this pipeline. So there will be new challenges, new opportunities. We talk about 21st century skills. There are new competencies that young people need to be able to showcase. But I don't know, again, we have for such a long time focused on measuring our education practice in terms of the results that kids get. And I don't think, we have done enough to assess whether they actually have, picked up adequate skills that will enable them to step into a world that's going to look radically different, whether it is related, as you say, to traveling, or whether it's just, whether we need to change the way we learn, or how we engage, or how we make sense. But we will still need to be able, to solve problems. We will need to be creative. We will need to be able to communicate. We will need to be able to collaborate. And I think our system now needs to figure out how we actually equip young people with those kind of competencies.
I agree with you. I must say, teachers have also been quite challenged, and there's quite a few skills that I assume teachers need to learn in a very short period of time now. And possibly with the world looking different, some teachers might grow a lot, and some teachers might feel this world is not for them, and they might want to leave, or might feel unwanted in their education. What skills do you think teachers need to acquire in this period of time, or educators in general?
Well, I think you're hitting the proverbial nail on the head. I think for a long time we've said that we need to find new ways of doing old things. And maybe some of our older teachers, have resisted some of the change, and they were able to say, listen, I was born before computer. And again, they relied on their skill and expertise in terms of them being in education for a long time. But we're all now at a point where we need to embrace technology, and we need to see ourselves not just as consumers of technology, but actually people who use technology to enable us to do our jobs better and more effectively. But again, I think, and maybe you can comment as well, I think for a long time, institutions that have been involved in teacher training, were expected to ask themselves whether they are equipping young teachers for the real work experience. Have they adopted new practices? And I think if we have to go back into these institutions, we'll probably find that they've been doing the same stuff. Back in the day, if a teacher explained and you didn't understand, and they would say it again. And if you still don't understand, they just say it louder with more energy, as if that's going to help. And I think in terms of our teaching practices and the way in which we equip young teachers to go into the profession, I think we have to admit that, we've stayed behind. So universities and colleges have to also go back to the board and ask whether they are really equipping young teachers who are able to facilitate learning in a radically different way. And I think that's our challenge going forward.
I agree with you. I remember we had a lecturer when I studied education in the last year who asked these questions that we just felt it's not fitting for the system that we're in. But looking back now, he knew he was preparing us for the systems that might come by asking questions that don't fit the box. So I think sometimes getting us all thinking is probably step one. But what I've seen now in these last 3 weeks is that we don't like to think so much if our circumstances stay the same. The moment our circumstances change, then thinking has to increase very quickly. So there's a blessing in all of this as well. We find that a lot of learners, there are learners who struggle, who can't cope with this type of learning setup, and they might feel that he or she is not capable of doing what is expected of them. Any advice for learners that feel that way?
Well, when as you asked the question, I'm reminded of a quote. I think it's by a guy with the name of Robert Meehan, who said, you might be teaching a class, but at the end of the day, each child should feel as if he or she was taught uniquely and individually. So I think there are actually, there might be more pros to what we're going through now. If we think in terms of learning, sometimes people refer to what they call learning styles. The fact that some of our learners are visual, some of them are auditory, and some of them are kinesthetic. But we've always been in a system where it's almost a one size fits all kind of approach. So when kids enter our classrooms, we assume and presume that they are all the same, and if they can't keep up, they are left behind. But I think what we have now with kids being able to tap into technology, to sit at home, to do things at their own pace, they are hopefully able to discover what their preferred learning style is. Do they love to see stuff? In other words, visually. Do they want to hear stuff, or hear themselves, or hear other people speak? Or do they physically want to do stuff, experiment and get involved? And obviously, we all know that if you want to, progress through life, there's probably a need for you to be able to move between the styles, and some stages you need to be able to tap into all three. So I think the current challenge probably presents more opportunity for young people to be able to do stuff, I almost want to say, in a personalized way, to do stuff at a pace that suits them, in a context that suits them, being able to tap into different resources, whether it's online or on paper. So I think, if we are able to see things differently, then there are probably more positives in this kind of exercise than what we might think initially.
I agree. We've been getting a lot of feedback from the learners as well. And I must say, it's interesting to try and adapt to all these different styles, because you can't really, every teacher can't adapt, or each system can't adapt. But at the same time, the one system benefits the one learner in the one subject, and another system benefits the learner in another subject. So, but I agree, the learners will definitely get to know their style. Links me to the parents now, because the parents are also getting to know their children in a new area now. A lot of parents might feel excited about this phase. They might love it, and some might feel frustrated or confused regarding all these links and platforms and data sources. And how do parents, within this new role that they're fulfilling as tutors or teachers or facilitators or disciplinarians, or they all probably feel different depending on their personality and home setup, how would you suggest parents, or people that have to look after the children this time, it might be the older brother or sister or someone, how do they deal with this frustration or this feeling of having this new role thrusted upon them?
Well, I think, that in principle, a parent or a guardian or a caregiver, there are probably three things that we've learned over the past couple of weeks. I think number one is that education is not as easy as people would think. The second thing that I think parents are becoming aware of is the fact that, often maybe we would have blamed the teacher, but they probably discover that the teacher isn't always to blame, as they spend more time with their kids. But I think the third thing that is probably also an awareness is the interplay between parenting and what one could call partnering, because it's really how do parents work with schools to get the best for and out of their kids. So I think if one had to compare the word parent with partner, you will pick up that in the word partner there's an extra R. And I think parents have an opportunity to think about the roles, and they have to think about responsibility. They still have the responsibility to have some crucial conversations with the kids in their homes. But there's also responsibility, and I think we need to trust the process. So parents need to trust educators as people who are skilled and competent to deliver and do what they need to do. And as you referred to links and content that's available online, I would suggest that as a parent, your first point of call would be your school. Your educators have already scanned the resources, they've vetted, they've cleared what is okay and what is not okay. And I think that is where they should start, and if there's need for additional resources, then obviously you can scan the internet. But if you do not know what you're looking for, my word, you can sit there for days, months, and weeks. So I think it is about clarifying a role and parenting. Maybe there's a role around mentorship, that we should use this time to M, to motivate, to E, to share experience, to N, to expose our learners or our kids to networks, to TO, to optimize talent, and then R, to invest in relationships. And I think that's what parents need to do, but they also need to trust that educators are skilled to journey with the youngsters and take them to the next level.
There are some learners and parents definitely, who might have some uncertainties regarding their kids' future, where they might have had to use the marks of 2020 to get into tertiary institutions of education,
Sure.
or possibly even kids who play sports who needed the video material of the season to send that out to abroad or wherever they would have liked to play. And there might be some fears regarding their 2021, or it could even be grade 7s or grade 6s who need these marks to apply for a high school, which we know there's a lot of pressure as well on the system to get into high schools of their choice. What are your thoughts on just the emotional, the roller coaster that they might be going through regarding the fears of their future?
Well, I think on the one side, it is again, it's almost becoming comfortable with the uncomfortable. It's trusting the process, but it's also, almost like the need to have faith that we will come out of this stronger and better. I mean, I'm at the university and we in student recruitment, and often when we go out trying to attract young people, then obviously as an institution at Stellenbosch, we look at your grade 11 results in terms of provisional acceptance. So if for the moment we just focus on the academics, I mean, you spoke about sport, and there might be other issues around, programs like drama, for instance, where you have to, submit a video to show us that you're competent. But if you just look at the academics, then in principle, we grant provisional acceptance based on grade 11 results. So I think, again, there's an opportunity for higher education to rethink. I think for a long time, we've had this need to say, how do we identify potential apart from marks? So worst case scenario, we have an 11 mark, and we would be able to grant provisional acceptance. I think we have data that suggests that in many contexts, and again, I'm talking about, let's call it the more affluent contexts, that there's a good correlation between 11 and 12. So if we grant provisional acceptance, we kind of sure that the kind of quality that we will have at the end of 12, we have a good idea as to what that is. But there are other contexts in which it's a little bit more difficult, because you need to look at the performance of young people relative to their context. So again, I think there's an amazing opportunity for universities to start thinking about talent identification and how do we nurture talent going forward. But I think in terms of trying to understand where we are, I mean, there's a guy with the name of Tim Elmore who said that, we can describe this new generation, which we call Generation Z, with an acrostic which he calls partner. And the basic idea is that, number one, they are private. Number two, they're anxious. 3, they are restless. T, they are techno savvy. So that's a good thing, because they know how to use technology. But N, they are nurtured. And then E, they're entrepreneurial, and R, they are redemptive. So I think, in terms of the tech savvy, that is what we need to play into. As parents and teachers, we need to find ways to take away the anxiety. Because I know that a lot of them want absolute surety. They want to know that they're going to get into university, but sometimes that's not the way life works. And again, as we deal with lockdown, maybe those are some of the conversations we should have, that parents can talk about their own failures and how they learned from that, and how that enabled them to step into the next reality. So I know that there is anxiety. I know that there is uncertainty. But at the end of the day, we can just stick to what we know how to do, and that is to go forward one step at a time.
Thank you for that. That's unbelievable advice. I think, one step at a time. A lot of people have to focus on that right now, especially if they think about finances or anything in that pertaining to the future. We're talking to some of the kids and we're asking them what should be different at school when you get back, and then some suggestions have been slops. Definitely everyone slops. It's really comfortable, or pantoffels soos ons in Afrikaans sê. Hulle koffiemasiene, lyk my hulle drink lekker koffie daar by die huis.
Okay.
Baie vinnige internet, so but I must say that I'm not sure how much of their wish list will change when they get back to school, so depending on where they are. But
sure.
I read a while ago the recipe for success. Now there might be so many, and it said that step number 1 is work hard.
Yeah.
Step number 2 is eliminate excuses one by one, and step number 3 is find a solution. And I think it's up to the parents and the teachers and even the fellow students to help each other to understand what are the problems that's facing them on a daily level, whether it's slow internet, whether it's teachers not communicating properly, whether it's the dog barking and wants to play the whole time and them being distracted with a game on their cell phone. So I think from a school side, I think that's a great thing for the kids to just think, as you said earlier, what is going on inside of them or inside of their community, and how can they relate to that and still head forward. But any last thoughts to the parents or grade 12 learners or anyone that's currently listening to this video from your side?
Well, just quickly before I share my last words, I mean, as you were talking now about, technology and what will be different when they get back to school, I think there's a need for us to understand almost like the interplay between, let's call it timely and timeless. So there are lots of things that we need to do to remain relevant, whether that is technology, tapping into whatever is on offer. But at the other end of the scale, there's a need for us to never lose sight of the timeless stuff. Kids still need to be helped in terms of transitioning into adulthood. And those things are timeless. So those conversations need to be ongoing conversations. But from my side, as we kind of wrap up our conversation, and thank you again for inviting me. It's been awesome to sit with you and to think with you while we're chatting. Uncertainty is part of life and challenge is part of life. I actually took myself back the other day when we now talked about education and the disruption of education, and took myself back to the year 1985. Now, I don't know if you were around in 1985 already, but in 1985, we had, a lot of unrest in the country. And in that year, our schools were closed for 3 months.
Sure.
And that for me is just a reminder that, young people are resilient. And through challenge, we come out better on the other side. I was standing outside the other evening, and as I was looking up at the night sky, this realization that you only see stars at night. So you have to go through dark patches to really shine and to discover, who you are and what you're capable of. I was reminded of a story. Apparently, Isaac Newton lived through the London plague, which was in the mid 1600s. And during that time, his college was actually shut down and he was forced to go home. And while he was sitting at home there, that is the time that he made this major inroads into what we now call calculus. He played with prisms and sorted out optics, but he also formulated his laws of gravity. So again, I think we have to understand that challenge is part of life, and we actually grow through these challenges. So again, from my side, I know we're in uncertain times, but if we can figure out how to see possibility, I think this is an amazing, exciting time. We will all come out of this. As Steve Jobs said, we can only make sense of life when we look backwards. You can only connect the dots after. So I think in a couple of years from now, when we look back, we will actually celebrate this challenge and we'll realize that as let's call it humanity, we are in a much better place. We understand who we are, but we also understand our connection with other people. And we finally understand that we have one planet and we need to look after her.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to hearing you speak again, wherever, on whichever platform. I'm also quite challenged in this time by linking institutions such as Stellenbosch or the school where we are at, and thinking what's our role in helping or not helping, or joining up or exposing our kids and ourselves to places where it's not as affluent or not as smooth running, etc. And that's difficult within the time frames, or there's always a rush for the next sports practice or the next bus you need to get on, or the next. And I know this question wasn't scripted, so we could, I just want to hear your heart regarding it. For an affluent person or an affluent institution, not that I'm saying everyone that is in Stellenbosch University or at Paul Roos Gymnasium is affluent, but just for someone that has been exposed to many things, who has stood on the shoulders of giants, how do we go about serving South Africa, where we are so majorly spread out from A to Z? How do we go on serving after we have been through this? How do we go back and not just get more for ourselves, but how do we serve properly?
Well, I think maybe at the heart of what you're saying or asking, is how do we move from almost like a mindset of scarcity to a mindset of abundance? I think that for a long time, we have always focused on the things that make us different. But I think what the pandemic has brought to us is this awareness that we are all connected. And maybe what we should do is to focus on what we have in common. So if we as educators can start by focusing on the commonalities, whether you're in Paul Roos or whether you are teaching in Kayamandi or in Khayelitsha, at the end of the day, your purpose for being there is to leave young people better. And if we focus on that as a start, then maybe we would become more open to share our lived experience, but also to share our knowledge and to share our expertise. I had a conversation one day with a guy called John DeGrucci, and he said the one question that keeps him up is the following: how do I want the next generation to live? And I think maybe that's a question that we should ask as South Africa. How do we want the next generation to live? And once we've answered that question, we will realize that we then need to be bold enough to start doing the things that will get us to that next level. Or in the words of Malcolm X, if we can replace I with we, then even illness becomes wellness. And maybe that's what we need to do. Focus more on we and step away from I.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much for your time and just your heart. We, like you say, it's a we. That's one thing that has been very beneficial in this time, is the interconnectedness of people all around the globe, even from different societies, and just how we could chat to one another where normally we would have been so busy. I told my wife last night that normally we would have coached sports where I'm working for 8 to 10, 15 hours a week. Now we're not doing that. So that time needs to be used properly. But yeah, thank you so much.
Dankie vir die oproepie en dankie dat ek saam gesels.